Thanks, Brianna.
All right.
Perfect. Welcome, everybody. And please join, if you're just now joining us, please feel free to put your name and information in the chat. Because we only have an hour, we're gonna power through. We're getting started right on time, and we're just excited you're here with us today because we have a lot to share. So we are TexProtects. My name is Adriana, and I'm very excited that you're here joining us today for our From the Capital to Your Community session overview. This is our one virtual opportunity to share. We'll share at the end of the meeting. We're also working on coming out to communities across the state, so we hopefully will be in a community near you soon. But here is our agenda today. It'll feature several of our policy team. And Brianna, you want to go to the next slide real quick? Next. Awesome. So if you don't know anything about TexProtects, we have been around for about 20 years. We were founded in Dallas, but we're a statewide organization that focuses on public policy and the implementation of policy, all focused on strengthening families and preventing child abuse and neglect. And in our 50-year history, we've passed about 55 bills and about 267 million for prevention programs. I'm going to turn it over now to Andrea Sparks, who we are just so blessed to have as a board member and who was our chair of our policy committee. And she just was such an amazing leader. Just very grateful that she has been with us to get us going this year. Andrea, it's all you.
Awesome. Well, it was a joy to work as Public Policy Advisory Committee Chair this year, not only with Adriana and Carrie and Brianna, but with all of our Public Policy Advisory Committee members who we had a really robust team. They helped us come up with these priorities, really helped shape them and inform them. And I think we had a good session because of that. Just a little context, this session, we say every session was weird. This session was weird too. It started out with a lot of new House members and a true speaker's race, a conservative versus a more conservative potential speaker. And Rep. Burrows from Lubbock was able to win out over Rep. Cook from Mansfield. And what that meant was that there were vice chairs that were Democrats of the committees, but the two sides had already pledged that they were not going to be the two Republican sides, that there were not going to be Democratic chairs in the House of those committees. So that was kind of a new thing this session. There were a lot of new members that were elected to support specifically the educational savings accounts or the private school vouchers, whatever you call them. And those did pass. And there was a new human services chair and lots of new members on that committee. So TexProtects, like everyone in this space, had to do a lot of educating and really introducing people to these issues. There was a surplus, so there was money to spend, but there was also a sense that last session, and this is true, there was a historic increase in prevention funds. And so there wasn't an appetite to really expand upon that. We were just hoping to hold steady on that. And we did ask for some more funding. We'll talk about that in a second. But there wasn't a big appetite to increase largely again after that historic increase last session. There were a record number of bills filed, and everybody we talked to at the Capitol, the staffers, by February, we're saying we're exhausted. It seems like this session's going really fast. We're really busy already. The Senate moved super fast. Dan Patrick, Lieutenant Governor, has a really good control over the Senate. The House moved a little slower because of the speaker's race and the delays, but it seemed like a really fast session. And if you weren't on X, unfortunately, Twitter, or other social media, specifically X, you missed a lot because a lot of it played out on social media. But it turns out that about 14% of the bills were passed out of the House and Senate, sent to the governor. The governor did veto 28 bills, and including one budget item, the SNAP, not the SNAP, it's not SNAP. He mentioned SNAP in his veto proclamation, but it's not SNAP. It's Summer EBT, Summer Food Program. And then declared a special session on 6 of those bills that will start July 21st. Just some of the trends we saw. Again, not a huge appetite to spend a lot of money on prevention or mental health, or really DFPS issues. The last few sessions have been really focused on that with the federal lawsuit and CBC, community-based care. But lots of influences coming from the Trump administration, who was sworn in January, including we saw Doge kind of issues. We saw that was contagious to Texas. There was the Doge committee formed here, government efficiency. The MAHA movement started here in Texas. Some issues about SNAP, definitely some immigration issues. But TexProtects was in a really good spot with our incredible board and public policy advisory committee, and of course our staff. So I'll let y'all take it away on what was actually accomplished this session.
All right, if you want to go ahead, and there you go. So just real quick, for those that maybe I haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Carrie Judice. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy here at TexProtects. But we're going to jump into basically what we were pushing for this session and what ended up happening and what didn't. So this session, one of our goals was to make sure that there is a continuum of services and supports available across all communities for Texas families. And as you all can remember, last session, as Andrea was talking about, there was that increase in 65 million for prevention services through the Family Support Services Division. So like she mentioned, we knew going into this session that the legislature was not going to be looking to make another large investment. And we were right in that assumption, and they did provide level funding, but we were strategic in our asks, and we focused on asking for additional funding for programs that did not get the increase last session. And thankfully, we were able to see that $1 million was actually appropriated for both the programs that serve fathers and military families. So that was definitely a win there. And so while there wasn't as much focus on family support services, there was continued focus on Thriving Texas Families, which was formerly known as Alternatives to Abortion. The legislature ended up investing an additional $60 million into these kinds of services, but it's worth mentioning that some limits were also set around who can go after these dollars. So Senator Kolkhorst passed Senate Bill 1388, which essentially laid out the intention for these funds to be distributed to smaller nonprofits, not large entities like hospitals or governmental agencies. In addition to actual funding being provided by the legislature, Senator Paxton and Representative Cody Harris, they actually were able to pass a bill that establishes the Strong Families Tax Credit, which is going to incentivize businesses to contribute to family strengthening services, like Family Support Services Division has, and like Thriving Texas Families, and like many of you on this call today provide to families in your communities. We also saw additional funding for community mental health grants, it was an increase from last session, as well as efforts to bolster the mental health workforce. And we also saw some efforts to sustain the suicide and crisis lifeline by essentially setting up a trust fund. If you want to go ahead and change the next slide. Another one that you've probably seen from a lot of from us and a lot of our partner organizations, there was also a huge win for childcare. Ultimately, there was an additional $100 million put into the budget, as well as a prioritization of childcare workers, making sure that their kids are prioritized to get into childcare facilities. So that was a huge thing that was led by the legislature and Senator Kolkhorst. Another win that we saw was Medicaid coverage for lactation consultation services. So that was definitely good as well. But while I'm talking about Medicaid coverage, we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So one of the missed opportunities, honestly, there were not a lot of bills that passed that would add different supports and services to Medicaid coverage. We did see the lactation services, and there was a nutrition consultation as well, but there wasn't even an appetite for looking into the feasibility of Medicaid reimbursement for home visiting, which is something that we had pushed this session. And generally, we were expecting a lot more wins for mental health. than what actually ended up happening, especially since there was so much momentum around Children's Behavioral Health Strategic Plan. So we didn't end up seeing the asks that we were looking for, like additional yes waiver supports, as well as infant and early childhood mental health consultation. We know those pilots are going to lose funding at the end of the year for several of those pilots. And unfortunately, we were not able to secure state dollars to replace those. And then, as you already heard Andrea mention earlier, one of the things that we were looking at as a win, but unfortunately got vetoed by the governor, was for the summer EBT. They initially were going to put in $60 million, but that ended up getting vetoed in the end. All right, Brianna.
Okay, so our second area is about making sure that families are actually connected to the resources. So Carrie talked about building them up and having this robust amount of services and communities, but we really focused on how are families accessing those and getting connected. So one of our main focuses was looking at 211, specifically option 1 of 211, which is focused on information and the information and referral network. So think about who you would call whenever you're looking for a food pantry or some kind of community resources. We wanted to see that expand and be strengthened. Also looking at family resource centers, Help Me Grow, Kinship Navigator programs, seeing what we could do during this session to build out those supports. What we saw actually happen and pass was the state did invest in option 2 of 211, which is the other side focused on benefits and eligibility. And so there was an additional $163 million given to improve that side of 211. And also there was over 600 employees given to make sure that the caller experience is improved. So those are for benefits such as SNAP, TANF, Medicaid. While that is not exactly what we had set out our hopes on at the beginning of session, this will bring positive impact to option 1, because there is some overlap. If people are calling 211, maybe they press the wrong number. Both numbers are in 211, so it can be a confusing process. So these benefits will trickle down and impact option 1, which is what we hoped for. There was what we consider a missed opportunity is it was a speaker priority. House Bill 38 by Representative Busey was really what us and some of our partner organizations really put our weight behind, and that bill would have brought technology advances and strengthen the infrastructure to the referral network. And so while this didn't pass, we will continue to advocate for those changes to come in sunset next session in the interim. So we are still hopeful to see those changes come.
I almost didn't unmute myself. All right. So another priority we had going into session, we wanted to ensure that relatives and friends of the family that step in to care for a child have the supports that they need. And historically in this space, we've seen the legislature put a lot of resources and time in focusing on formal kinship caregivers, which that's referencing relatives and friends of the family that care for a child when the child's in state custody. But we went into session also really pushing for informal kinship caregivers, which again is whenever they're stepping in and the state doesn't have custody. And this was really the first time we have seen legislation move and pass that targets this population specifically. So for instance, Senator West really led the way on making sure child support can more quickly be transferred to kinship caregivers, and to make sure that they can use their address to enroll a child in school. So considering what we were hearing over and over was about the decisions, not being able to make, not having the legal authority to make decisions, these were huge wins. We also saw continued focus on formal kinship as well. So really there's been a lot of focus on this particular area specific to making sure that they can become licensed. Because we know that there are far more supports in place when a caregiver becomes licensed in the system. So What we do know is that there's a kin-specific licensure that is supposed to be coming out in the fall. And so we saw legislation that would ensure that licensing agencies don't put additional requirements on these caregivers. After all, we want to make sure that we're making the process easier, not harder, and not necessarily skimping on the safety requirements, because obviously we want kids to continue to be safe, but we don't want there to be all this red tape around ways for relatives to be able to care for the kids in their home. Another thing I want to be able to focus on here is there was a kinship campaign. So there was a budget directive that actually was led by Representative Aisha Davis, that to make sure that kin knows what funds are available to them, the different kind of benefits. And honestly, that is going to help both formal and informal kin. So this is definitely a huge win for all kinship caregivers. Go ahead and move to the missed opportunities. So where we had hoped to see more focus was on funding for the wonderful Kinship Navigator programs that are doing really great work in 4 different areas of the state. Their funding is coming to an end at the end of the year, and we really were hopeful that the state would invest so that these could continue. Unfortunately, the state did not invest any dollars into this, but hopefully there are going to be some creative ways to keep these up and running, because we know they're doing wonderful things for families. We also tried to tackle the issue of how costly it can be to pursue legal authority to make decisions on behalf of the children in their homes. We worked again with Representative Aisha Davis and Senator West on House Bill 4870. And ultimately, what it would have done is establish a grant program under the Office of Court Administration to help offset the cost of those legal fees, which we know can get to be $7,000 to $10,000, which is obviously a huge burden on families. It made it through the House, stalled in the Senate, as a lot of bills did. But again, you'll pick up the theme here as we continue to pursue opportunities for this in the interim. So another priority that we had this session was to make sure there are supports for families who end up on CPS's radar, so that we can keep families together and prevent removals. As many of you know, our state has been in the process of shifting the responsibility of foster care to community providers across Texas. This is community-based care. You've probably heard the acronym CDC. One thing we were expecting this session was there to be an effort to move family preservation efforts under the purview of CBC contractors. Senator Colcourse really led the efforts through Senate Bill 1398, and ultimately it's going to move the Texas Family First pilots that are operating in different areas of the state under their purview and make them permanent. So no longer pilots, permanent. As a reminder for those that haven't heard us talk about those, these pilots, they provide families with evidence-based programs that address issues such as mental health, substance use, and in-home parenting. We've heard such great reviews of these, especially from the providers out in those communities. And so we also saw funding for those provided so that those can continue. And one really excellent thing is that they also had a budget directive that will allow them to serve more families if funding will allow. And that could include families. I'm sure you all have heard us talk about how sometimes families are relinquishing kids to the state because they don't have the mental health resources that they need. So that could potentially be families that could receive these services. Or even families that have been reunified, whenever that's a really critical point to make sure that there are supports in place. So we're definitely very hopeful and glad to see that result. Real quick on this too is just when I say family preservation efforts, you heard me say that the Family First pilots are moving. Just to make note of this, traditional FBSS is not being moved over under their purview. There needs to be further discussion about that ultimately, which I think is a good call there. And so if you go ahead and move to the next slide, I do want to just stop here real quick, because I know several folks on this call probably want to know, well, what happened more broadly with community-based care? So we saw actually a lot of legislation aimed at more oversight over the CBC contractors, as well as flexibility for CBC contractors. For instance, out in West Texas. They were given the green light to implement a version of CPC that better fits their community. Also, since we all know that there have been over time just different concerns popping up out of the different areas that are implementing CPC, lawmakers just wanted to make sure that DFPS and the courts have more transparency about how things are going, as well as providing different tools in their toolbox to step in and make changes when necessary. And that can be things like being able to change case management, performance remedies, and even receivership if it gets to that extent. And then this last little piece just shows you a little bit of what they ended up investing, because we know that we need to have proper investment if this is the direction that Texas is going. All right. The missed opportunities, I would say, under this is it's not that there wasn't concrete services that were provided, like you've heard us talk about. Things like childcare. Obviously, that's a big win. But again, that veto of the summer EBT was a big one. But also, there was a bill that Representative Hull, which chairs the Human Services Committee in the House, she had even tried to get more financial supports for families that are going through the reunification process and beyond when CPS dismisses a case, so that we don't end up seeing these families come back on CPS's radar. And unfortunately, there just was not an appetite for that either.
All right, sorry about that. Our fifth and final priority area is about preventing child sexual abuse. Specifically, when session started, we had two main focuses we were taking this. One, protecting children in schools, specifically around improper relationships between teachers and students, and then also doing online protection, making sure that kids are safe online. So I want to highlight two bills specifically that fall under this. SB 2420 by Paxton and Fairley is the App Store Accountability Act, and we are so happy that this passed. They had many different supporters on both sides in the House and the Senate, and legislators on both sides of the aisle. So we were really encouraged by that. What that will do is provide an additional layer of support to parents, making sure that they know how to keep their kids safe online. The second one I want to talk about is SB 571 by Betancourt. There was 15 co-authors on this bill in the Senate. So half of the Senate signed on to this. It's a huge bill. The priority we were mainly focused on was making sure that if there is a educator who is acting improperly with a student, that there is the right response to that those cases are not treated differently than if an adult was harming a child outside of school. And so that is included in 571, as well as many different other protections for children. So that was really encouraging that passed. There was some other common themes that we saw addressed in various bills around AI and AI being used to create child abuse material, really harmful, scary things that are being used now. With it all being new technology, along with that came some increased penalties for new things that didn't exist before AI, and creating new criminal charges for people who are using technology to harm children. Another thing we're happy to say passed is Trey's Law. And so there was lots of conversation about non-disclosure agreements, and specifically in regards to whenever someone has been a victim of sexual abuse, making sure that their victims are not silenced by the abuse that happens to them. One thing you'll see it here on the slide is that the state really had an interest in mandating the use of the See It tool. And so what that is it's a tool that can be used as a preventative measure to identify things early with youth. So specifically, it's going to be used with system-involved youth, and this would allow adults to intervene early. There was a speaker priority bill to improve what the medical process looks like whenever someone experiences sexual abuse, making sure that there are increased protections for them if they are in a medical setting. And then finally, I want to talk about employment standards and screeners for employers. We saw multiple different bills get passed about recognizing the training that's going on, as well as like the vetting process for employers to have whenever the people that they hire are working with youth. And so here we'll be sending the slides out, we'll be sending the recording out to y'all, but here are some specific numbers. But overall, just wanted to highlight that a lot got done in Texas in both the House and the Senate, and both by Republican and Democratic members. And so I'm very encouraged that these kind of things are taken serious in this state, and that we all hands are on deck. And I think that we will continue to see movement in this area.
Thanks, Brianna. Can we pause just 1 second? Andrea, do you want to answer the one question that's been posted in the chat about what mechanism does SB 2420 provide that will help parents keep kids safe online?
Sure. So the App Store Accountability Act will basically require parental consent before a child, anyone under 18, either purchases an app, downloads an app, or makes an in-app purchase. And there are ways that already exist for Google and Apple, the two main app stores, right, to ensure that parents get that notification and can then allow or disallow. So it's really about putting the power in the parents' hands, as well as, some of those terms and conditions that you might accidentally or unknowingly agree to when you download an app are not really going to be understood by kids. So there's data privacy concerns, monetization of kids, and trying to get them to buy more things every time they play a game. And so there's just a lot of concerns, not only about the inappropriateness of some of the content on the apps, but just the fact that these kids cannot enter into agreements with tech companies with informed consent. So it's parental consent, basically.
Thank you.
Carrie?
All right. I do want to spend just a little bit of time talking about some other more downstream wins. As you all may know, TexProtects chairs the Child Protection Roundtable, which has a broader scope when it comes to child welfare. So I wanted to highlight a few things specifically. One thing I think that is definitely worth mentioning here, because it has been a long time coming, is that there was finally a significant investment to overhaul the state's clunky case management data system. So that was definitely, like I said, a long time coming, and a good thing coming out of session. We also saw some really good things for youth aging out of care and former foster youth. For instance, there was focus on financial literacy between House Bill 27 by Representative King and House Bill 4655 by Representative Hull. This is going to help older youth understand the risks that come with different financing options, like payday loans, things like that, as well as education on rental assistance and buying a car. We also saw the age limit extended for former foster youth who have aged out of care to access their tuition and fee waiver. Right now, they can only access this until they are 25. This was actually raised to 27 this session. We also did see some good measures for mental health. For instance, now it can be an excused absence if a student is going to a mental health appointment. So again, just a little bit common sense there, but I'm really glad to see that. And there also was funding for intensive peer support services, which is a huge win as well. And then I'll go over a few more here. We did see a bill pass to make sure that DFPS can't dismiss a case while a youth is on runaway. And then also there were a couple of different adoption measures that were that ended up passing. And ultimately, they're both about making sure that there's transparency in costs in the adoption process, as well as information shared. So just again, so you know all the information about the kiddo that's becoming part of your family. So again, we saw some good measures for kids in care. All right, so now we wanted to open this up. And I see a question already for high acuity youth. If you're talking about the peer support services, that is for high acuity youth. I don't know if that was what your question specifically was.
It might be what the definition, what do we mean by high acuity youth, Carrie?
Just essentially what we mean by that is like kiddos that typically have just more behavioral, why can't I think of the right term? Just generally like whenever there are more behavioral issues, different it may be kids that are coming in with more mental health concerns, things like that. But that's typically what we're talking about with high acuity youth.
Do you see that Lana has posted a question about the bill with grooming being registered as a sex offender?
I can speak to that, Carrie,
Thanks,
unless
Andrea.
Go for
so
it.
this was another one of those bills that was named after a child, and it's escaping me right now. There was actually it was Trent Ashby's bill. Something happened in his district. A little girl was being cared for by a known predator. He had been prosecuted for grooming, but there wasn't anything that required him to register as a sex offender. So his parents, no one knew. So, and he ended up killing her. So this is a bill that says when, there is a crime called grooming for sexual abuse now. And if you are convicted of that, you are supposed to register, you're required to register as a sex offender to put people on notice that you're dangerous to children. Yeah,
Any
I
other
feel
questions?
I feel like this whole section that we're talking about, the child sexual abuse issue, is really something where TexProtects intentionally, really before session, decided we were going to step up and step into the space with both feet, because there's so much going on. Y'all have seen the headlines. I feel like there's just one every day about teacher misconduct and inappropriate relationships, and then all the stuff online. And there were a ton of bills filed. We were very fortunate to work pretty closely with a survivor, Faith Colson, who lives here in Texas. She's a national expert, but moved to Texas, and she was able to help us really weigh into those issues in a meaningful way. Any other questions? We've done this in record time.
We have a few more slides
We,
before we go, so if you
Okay.
think about something else, please put it in the chat. We worked through a lot. We were so wary of the time that we that we really worked through a lot quickly. So our apologies, but we will be sending out the recording and the slides. There were some bills that we didn't mention that were included in the slides because we wanted you to be able to have access to the list. And so hopefully that is useful to you. This slide just shares a little bit about how you can get involved with us. We have a couple networks that are very productive ways of being engaged and up to date. One is the Child Protection Roundtable, which is representative of about 80 organizations that work year round to meet regularly. Carrie is our chair, chaired by Carrie, and we have a wonderful executive committee that works with her, and they guide the work. But during session, they meet weekly, and it really focuses on the entire continuum of child welfare. More specific to prevention, we have the Texas Prevention Network, and if you scan that QR code right there, you will directly connect with San Juanita Rubalcaba, who heads up our prevention network. And that is a network of over 280, almost 300 individuals who learn alongside each other virtually. So we love using these networks, so please join us. We'd love to have you. Let's go to the next slide real quick. A couple of the ways that we engage the networks are in advocacy. So we've done events locally, and we had a day at the Capitol in addition to Wear Blue Day, Go Blue Day. And so these are some photos from Day at the Capitol. We had a fantastic showing of advocates from across the state. who these are some of their quotes. They were really, many of them had never been to the Capitol before or participated in advocacy. So we'd love your assistance in spreading the word. This was our first time really making the event an event of the Prevention Network and really trying to make sure that we had representation from communities across the state. So we'd love to continue to expand that and see you there next time too. Brianna, next slide. So we, as I mentioned earlier, are excited to be bringing this from the Capitol to your community, to a community near you. We are actually, Carrie and I are going to head down to Fort Bend next week for our first one. We're excited about that. And then we've got a couple more already scheduled in Lubbock for September 17th, Dallas October 3rd, Houston October 16th. We'll be pushing out the dates, times, and locations soon. And we're also looking to schedule events in East and South Texas. And if you'd like us to come out to visit you, please feel free to reach out and let us know. We'd love the opportunity.
Adriana, can I say
Yeah.
one more thing?
Yeah.
We were talking about summer EBT and how it was vetoed, but don't think the work is over, because I just got off the phone with a group and Rep. Wally, who really pushed that. If anybody's interested in signing on to a letter to the governor, the top three, lieutenant governor and speaker, please reach out. There's a plan in the works to send that letter. We don't need legislation for summer EBT. We just need a directive by exec. And there was some misunderstanding about its ties to SNAP. It's actually not the same as SNAP. And also, I just want to, make a call for, people are already talking about interim charges and what we can do next session, what we should be studying during the interim. We'd love to hear from you. We don't have all the answers. We get our best ideas from you all. So that's a good segue into this next slide, which I think Adriana is going to present. But
Yeah. Thank you, Andrea. Next steps is exactly right. The meetings that we'll be bringing from the community to your, from the Capitol to your community across the state will be more interactive. They will be much longer, and we'll be doing them in partnership with community partners, because we really want time to, we want to make sure that we bring all the right people to the table, and we want time to hear exactly what Andrea said. We want to hear from you. We don't have the answers. In particular, next session, what's really important is it is the sunset process for several state agencies that impact everything that we've been talking about today. Health and Human Services Commission, State Health Services, DFPS, the Workforce Commission, and TJJD, the Juvenile Justice Department, are all going to be sunsetted next session unless there is legislation that continues them. I don't mean to frame it that way. I think the last time I framed it that way, I really caused concern. In most cases, most state agencies are continued. We did see this last legislative session that one agency was not continued, the Lottery Commission, but their work still continues. It's just in a different place. So it is an opportunity for us to think really think about our communities, our families in particular, to think about how we can support them without the silos that sometimes exist. Because at the end of the day, what's important is families get connected to services. They don't care whether the service comes to them from TEA or dishes or DFPS, right? At the end of the day, they just need support. And so this is an opportunity for us to raise our voices. So we'll be reaching out to you on that. Do you want to go to the next slide? So we just wanted to say thank you to Casey Family Programs. Sessions on the road, and just want to thank you again for joining us today. Is there any other questions before we get off? We'll be sharing out our slides, and we'll be sharing out the recording. So thank you, everybody. Andrea, Carrie, Brianna, anything you want to share?
No, thank y'all for joining us, and yeah, excited to see what next session will bring us.
I also,
I'll just say
before we get
ditto.
off, just wanted to say, I want to say thank you to Andrea as our policy advisory committee chair, and to Carrie and Brianna, who were a fantastic team this session. And Carrie, this was her first session as our director, and she did an outstanding job. And Brianna, we have just been so lucky to have her with us for the last year, and her time with us is coming to a close this week, but we're excited to see where she goes and her next steps. So thanks everybody for being here today, and we look forward to connecting with everybody in the future. Bye-bye.
Thanks.